Good morning, everyone. Amazing, you quieted down so quickly. We thought it would be hard to get your attention. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to one of my personal favorite events of the year, the announcement of Ipsos' most influential brands in Canada. I'm Penny Hicks, the Managing Director of Client Partnerships here at the Globe and Mail. It's our pleasure to host you here in Toronto at the beautiful Globe and Mail Centre, and all of you from across the country virtually this morning. Today's event is the result of a collaborative effort across Ipsos, the Canadian Marketing Association, Publicis Canada, and Globe Media Group. We're all proud to partner and support this comprehensive annual study led by Ipsos. So for today, we're going to kick off today's agenda by revealing the most influential brands for 2025, followed by a panel discussion and Q&A. After a short break, we'll return here for our keynote address by Diana Frost, Global Chief Growth Officer at the Kraft Heinz Company. Today's conversation about influence comes at the perfect time because brands don't exist within a vacuum. They are impacted by the same forces that we all feel every day. We're less than 2 months into 2026, and already so much has happened. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling at times overwhelmed with the frantic pace of the news, the content in the news, as well as the flooding of information coming from all different directions. In a fractured media landscape, citizens depend on trustworthy sources to help them distinguish fact from misinformation. That's why safeguarding and advancing independent journalism is essential to maintaining a healthy democracy and informed public. Trusted news organizations like the Globe and Mail play a vital role in bringing Canadians together and helping people make sense of the world around them. This is a responsibility that we take seriously. We are living in undeniably interesting times, and for brands, gaining consumers' trust is harder and more important than ever before. Figuring out how to achieve that trust poses a real challenge, and here is where the Ipsos study starts to come in. It helps us to understand which brands break through and why. Year over year, the study reveals a simple but powerful truth, that brands can never forget the context in which they live. Through 2025, Canadians from coast to coast to coast came together with a new patriotism and elbows up mentality. The call to buy Canadian has been a call to arms for many. I'm curious to see how this shift is reflected in this year's Ipsos results and whether this movement has impacted the brands which are most influential to Canadians. So, without further ado, let me introduce Steve Levy from Ipsos Canada. If you've been to this event before, as many of you have, Steve is instantly recognizable with his bald head and signature specs. See? He is synonymous with the boomer generation. And if you haven't been here before, this will reveal itself in the presentation. And look very closely today when you see that. Steve's career in leadership has spanned across the sales, brand management, and research functions. Among many things, he is the author of the most influential brand study globally. He's the recipient of the Canadian Marketing Association's Lifetime Achievement Award and was recently named a fellow to the Canadian Research and Insights Council. On a personal front, Steve loves hot weather and dedicates at least 100 days a year to Florida. So it's quite a miracle that we have him here on this cold February day. Please join me in welcoming Steve.
Thank you, Penny. So I'm short, bald, and aging. What a great introduction. Welcome to those of you who are joining us today and to the many people who are streaming. A quick show of hands, how many people have come to this event before? Gosh, and how many are newbies? Newbies. What's your name? Yeah, the guy with the foot, you got mouthful. What's your name? Kevin. Well, you know, we're going to be playing a close eye on you, Kevin, as one of the newbies. So, thank you. So the most influential brands, feel free to follow us at hashtag IpsosMIB15 to carry on the conversation. I should start by saying we are listening to you guys. So if you were here last year, you may recall that we did do a survey after the event, and there were a few things that you asked us to do. So the first thing was you said, look, can you improve the streaming quality? Well, we're trying. Remember that streaming quality is something that happens at your end as well, but we are trying. The second thing is, could we improve the Q&A? And we've definitely endeavor to do that. We have a new moderator this year. I think it's going to be spectacular. The third thing is you said, could you make the size of the name on the name tags bigger? Now, if you could all just look down, I think you'll agree that we really have improved the size of the name tag. More focus on Canadian brands, which we have done this year. And the last thing is you said, could we go deeper during this presentation? Well, the answer to that is actually no. We can't do that, sorry. Not in 45 minutes. I mean, in all honesty, this year in particular, we have enough content that we could jam it into 90 minutes, never mind 45 minutes. But that's why we have something called subscription. And that's going to be my only plug for the next 45 minutes or so. So why influence? Well, influence, let's remember, is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. That's what influence is. Why influence? Well, first reason is when we started doing this many years back, we looked at the space of things like, the most valuable brands, the most powerful business people. And there were a whole series of the mosts. And we felt, given that the role that brands play in our lives, there had to be a space to look at the most influential brand. That was one of the reasons. Anyone know Terry O'Reilly? People know Terry O'Reilly? Yeah. Terry O'Reilly started a podcast, actually started a radio show in 2005. It ran from 2005 to 2011, and it was called The Age of Persuasion. It's a great show. I had breakfast with Terry in 2011. We talked about the age of persuasion. We talked about influence. And I'd like to think that when they changed the name to Under the Influence, maybe we had some impact on that. Now, I'm going to come back to Terry in about 25 minutes. If you don't like the soft rationale, here's the hard rationale. The horizontal line on this slide is time, going all the way back to 2013. And the vertical line is the cumulative change in stock price. And we've taken the average of the Dow and the NASDAQ. We've used this slide many times over the years. And this is the market. And so if you've been in the stock market, you've done pretty well over time. There's no better investment that you would have made than stock. Not real estate, stock, and equities. But now take a look at when we overlay the 10 most influential publicly traded brands in any given year. Influential brands are worth more, a lot more, and consistently so. Influence does matter. It's important. As a brand, you want to have influence. And let's be clear, influence is not an output variable. It's not like value. It's an input. It's something that you can shape, something you can work with and change. Influence is important. This photograph, which I've used before and which you may have seen, was Time magazine's most influential photograph of the 20th century. It's 11 guys sitting on a beam in 1932, construction workers, as the Rockefeller Center is being built. Christ, the unions would never have this in 2025. But it really kind of reflects, and Penny mentioned this, the context of the time. It was the Depression. These were not good times. And that photograph captures, in many ways, the essence of the time. Actually, Time magazine have renewed this photograph with this one. So these are the architects of AI. And you take a look at the figures running from your left to right. These are the major players in the tech world today. This is the context that we live in 2025. Context really is important. And so let me give you our 90-second take on the context of 2025.
This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot.
Thank you all very much. I love Tesla.
the general impression of Trump in Canada?
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada because he's attacked his closest family member, and that's the way we look at it.
The 1-0 pitch. High fly ball. Left field. Rosarina. Watches it go.
I can't figure that last one out. I can't figure it out. But there was no shortage of context in 2025. So I am going to talk a little bit about influence. We will talk about Canadian brands. I am going to touch this year on influencers, for sure. We'll talk a little bit about a phenomenon that has clearly been in play for the past year or so in K-pop. I'll touch on the generations. We're going to pause, and I'm going to go back to Terry O'Reilly for a few minutes. We'll talk about some of this year's movers and shakers. That is brands that are not the most influential, but sure, did they make a move in 2025? Then I will introduce you to some of this year's most influential brands. Now, I will tell you that when we first started doing this, this was very much about ranking brands, but it's very, very different now. It has evolved, and hopefully those of you who've come a number of times will realize that this isn't really about only the ranking of brands. It's about the story behind many of those brands, how they gain influence, what they've been doing with it, and how other brands might acquire some of that thing that we call influence. So yeah, we've been doing it for 15 years. This year we surveyed almost 7,000 Canadians. We looked at 137 brands this year across 20 different categories. I interviewed 10 of Canada's CMOs, either brands that are among the top 10 or those that are gainers. And this is in a market where, and it's hard to figure out what the real number is because different sources provide different numbers, but somewhere in the $20 billion range. So if you want to know what we did and how we did it, this is the number to remember. That tells you everything. Publicists have been kind enough this year and in years past to provide us with a film crew to do those interviews, to bring them to life and to edit them. This year we interviewed 10 CMOs, but over the course of the life of this study, I've had the privilege to spend time with 53 different people. It has been a privilege, and I've learned a lot from those 53 people. Almost all of those interviews are uploaded. This year's will be uploaded in the not too distant future. If I had to pick one quote from this year's interviews, it would be this one. It's Sandra Sanderson at Sobeys when she said, "We," referring to the marketing community, "have gone from being content creators to becoming orchestrators of intelligence." Now, while no one else said that, I think that sentiment kind of ran through all of the interviews that I did. People ask us, well, how do you pick the 138 brands to include in the study in the first place? Well, there's two criteria. The first criteria is ad spend. And the folks at Media Radar are kind enough, and Andrea Beach, I don't know if Andrea is here today. If you are, you can wave your hand. But the guys at Media Radar are kind enough to provide us with a ranking of all of the brands in Canada by how much they spend and by media. So that's our first criteria. Our second criteria is judgment, because we know that there are some brands that don't spend a lot of money on advertising, but they just have to be there because they're so influential. It is the secondary criteria, but it is there. So let's talk just a little bit about influence. Now, influence is not one issue, it's not one question, it's not one variable, it's actually multifaceted, it's multidimensional. And there are indeed 11 different ingredients that go into this metric that we call influence. And they're varied by design. So it ranges from things like being fundamental to your life, to encouraging you to make smarter decisions, to things that you identify with, things that you can relate to, things that are relevant, and in some cases, changing your lexicon, introducing a new word into the vocabulary. 11 different items, we create one metric for every brand, and then we rank the brands on that metric. Okay, let's store that over here for a moment. As marketers, what you need are levers. to move up and down to increase the influence of your brand. And the first few years that we did this study, there were 5 such levers. There was engagement, presence, there was being leading edge, corporate citizenship, and trustworthiness. And then we had COVID. And the year that we had COVID, we saw 2 new dimensions come into play, empathy and utility. And they're still there. And this past year, we now have an 8th dimension. And we've called that 8th dimension the True North, which I'm sure you can imagine is very much about Canadian pride and patriotism. And the numbers that you see here are the degree to which each of these dimensions in 2025 contribute to the influence of all 138 brands. Now, of course, that differs considerably by brand. And by and large, most brands only have 2 or at the most 3 dimensions that contribute to its influence. Okay, let's talk about Canadian brands this year. Again, have to keep it relatively short, but this year there were 54 Canadian brands in the study out of the 138. There were 4 brands that are actually not Canadian, but you guys think they are. And then there were 11 brands that are Canadian, but you don't think they are. Now that's important, and I'll tell you why it's important in just a moment. So Canada versus the US, 53% of the Canadian brands this year went up, to some degree. 35% of the American brands went up. This is basically a flip-flop on what we would see in other years. That's a real change, a real change. And more importantly, the more strongly a brand is associated with being Canadian, the more likely it was to go up in influence. We saw lots of examples this year of brands, some of which are represented in this room, that moved their positioning to be more Canadian. Lots of examples. There's just a few of them. We also saw several brands this year that kind of switched their assets to reinforce a Canadianness, so to speak. Now, you know, Keanu Reeves with Rogers, he was in play before, so it was fortuitous that there's a Canadian personality. Ryan Reynolds at Tim Hortons, again, that was really in play towards the back end of last year, but it turned out to be a good move for Tim Hortons. But some of the other celebrities that you see on this slide actually were by design and were orchestrated fairly quickly. So we certainly saw examples of those things taking place. So what do you do with True North? Well, the first thing is, if you're known as a Canadian brand, then leverage it. The second is, if you're a secret Canadian brand, because people don't know you are, then you might want to start leaking the fact that you are. If you're an American brand with a lot of Canadian assets, like Heinz, for example, you know, Heinz, maybe people don't know this, but an awful lot of what Heinz and Kraft do in this country is done in this country, so to speak. Same is true with McDonald's, a lot of local sourcing. And of course, if you're an American brand, then you need to think about lowering or changing the tone of what you do. But, and this is a big but, timing was really important on this issue. Now, we do this study in November, partly because it's a consistency issue, partly because it's about the year that was passed. That's an important issue because when we looked at our Trump tariffs and turmoil tracking study, here's what we found through the course of the year. What you're looking at here is the public's perception of how bad our relationship is with the United States. So back early in the year, 7 in 10 Canadians thought that our relationship was actually getting worse. As the year progressed through the election, it dipped. There were fewer people who thought that. When the 35% tariff issue came into play, it moved back up, it bottomed out, and then when our premier ran that campaign in the US around tariffs with the Ronald Reagan issue, it moved back up. We poked the bear and it moved back up. But it bottomed out at the end of the year at 29%. So, we saw a 50-point change from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now, having been in this business a long time, we don't see 50-point swings in a year. That's very unusual, very unusual. But you can see that the sentiment at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, not the same. If that's not enough, I'm going to provide you with one other data point from our Trump tariffs and turmoil study, which is the support Buy Canadian issue. So this is buying more Canadian. You know, it peaked in March and April, 2/3 of Canadians saying that they would do this, and it bottomed out towards the end of the year at 46%. Again, we don't see 20-point spreads typically. I mean, it's very unusual. And this really reflected not only a softening, but a fatigue in attitude towards this issue, and a shift from values to value. That's what we saw during the course of the year. So the point being, could the True North issue have been a much bigger issue had we done the survey in March, April, or May? Maybe. Maybe. How can you talk about influence without talking about influencers? I mean, these days, I'm not sure that you can anymore. Coverage in the media for many influencers is, to say the least, frequent. To say the least, it's frequent. And of course, there are tiers of influencers. I mean, in some respects, you might think that there's 3 tiers. You know, tier 1 you might think of as micro-influencers. You know, these are kind of niche, they're experts, they have a smaller following count. They're kind of dedicated audiences, production values not so great. In the middle, you might have what we could call macro influencers, more established creators. They typically have a higher follower count. Production values are a little better, and they probably move across platforms. And the third, Mr. Beast here, for example, I mean, these guys are stars. I mean, this guy's a philanthropist. This guy now has 450 million followers. I mean, it's just enormous. It's truly staggering. So part of what we did was try to understand this issue of whether influencers make a difference from a marketing perspective and from a ranking perspective. So do you regularly follow social media influencers? Pretty crude measure, but it allowed us to establish those people who do regularly follow influencers. Back in 2021 in this country, it was 23%. Now it's 35%. And you can see that by generation, there's huge differences by generation. But when we look at brands, we also see differences. So what you're looking at here is the ranking of these 3 brands among those people who do not regularly follow influencers. And here what you're looking at is the ranking amongst those who do regularly follow influencers, and you'll see there's an enormous difference. Now you might say, well, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest, you know, I would expect that. And you'd probably be right. But let's overlay some brands that you might not think that's the case with. And you can see here that for some brands that you might not think that's the case, clearly it is. Clearly it is. It's legitimacy. These guys have become legitimate over time. And so it kind of leaves us with perhaps 4 thoughts rather. One is that most Canadian social media users trust a post from an influencer as much as they do from an A-list celebrity these days. The second is that conversion rates, watching influencers use products to purchasing them, is growing. The third is that authenticity is the top factor related to trust in influencer product recommendations. And the fourth is that the growth in the number of people that are making purchases directly on social platforms is becoming very evident. So let's pose that question again. How can you talk about influence without talking about influences? And the short answer is you can't. And then there's pop culture. K-pop is unique. And it encompasses South Korea's music, cinema, and lifestyle, including skincare, clothing, food, and God knows, I don't know how much more these days. Pop culture. How many people here are familiar with K-pop these days? Gosh, that's more people than I'd thought, actually. It is important. And there are, a number of places where we see this. Squid Game's enormous following. Demons, enormous following. I'm staggered by the numbers that when we look at this stuff these days. But again, what we try to do is try and understand who are the adopters, who are the rejectors. And this year, we found that 23% of Canadians fell into the bucket of adopters, 53% rejecters, and of course, way over indexes with millennials. Way over indexes. But again, the key is, how do they rank brands? How do the adopters rank brands? So here are the adopters, same 3 brands. Here are the rejectors. Huge difference. But again, you would say, well, Spotify, TikTok, and Twitter might expect that. Again, when we look at other brands that you might not expect it with, we see big differences, really big differences. And if you're not thinking K-pop as a marketer these days, you need to be doing so, because there is cultural resonance, there is an emotional connection, and the trend setting seems to be very apparent. Now, whether or not this is a trend or a fad, perhaps next year we can answer that question. Which brings us to the generations, at which point I'm going to have to take a quick swig. Excuse me. There are 6 generations alive in this country today. And it's important for marketers to understand the generational differences, partly because their values are imprinted early and they don't change. Typically, they don't change over time. But they are different by generation. So 6 generations alive at the same time. We're not going to talk about Gen Alpha. You know, they're aged between 1 and 12. They have no clout. They have no dough. So let's forget about Gen Alpha. We're not going to talk about the silent generation. They're very, very small. Marketers, by and large, ignore them. By and large, they do. That leaves us with 4 generations. So here's a quick whistle-stop tour on the 4 generations that you guys spend a lot of time with. So here's Gen Z, now aged 13 to 28. Gen Z came of age in COVID. They're anxious, they're cautious, they're realistic, they're digital natives, they're constantly connected, assertive, thoughtful, independent learners. They're agents of change, whether that's climate control, D&I, agents of change. They don't get how much it's going to cost, but they're agents of change. They're more open to different identities. They're very conscious of mental health. They have less faith in traditional milestones like marriage, like getting promoted, like ownership. And their main concern, because we track main concerns at Ipsos, their main concern is housing. Here we have the millennials. How many millennials are in the room? Okay, great. Thanks for coming today. Really appreciate that. There's really 2 cohorts in millennials, but we're going to treat it as the average here. So this is the generation that's still figuring it out. They're pragmatic. They really value flexibility. They're the most educated generation, the most resourceful, the most connected, a little bit overwhelmed. They question some of the choices that they've made in life. Their main concern is inflation. By the way, the millennials represent 28% of the population, and they have 21% of the net worth in this country. It's an important point, which we'll come back to. Here's Gen X. Got to be a lot of you guys in the room. How many Gen Xers are here? Oh, yeah, there you are. The Gen Xers, you represent 25% of the population and 25% of the net worth in this country. You're looking for reliability, convenience, value. You're media hybrids. You're independent, adaptable, self-reliant, bit on the skeptical side. You are incredibly busy. You are the busiest generation by far. Your top concern? All of them. My generation, boomers, now aged 61 to 79, 31% of the population, 38% of the net worth. The boomers aren't dead yet. I mean, if you're in banking and insurance, they're still around. And it's likely that they're going to spend their way to the grave. Boomers, some of them are retired, heaviest consumers of traditional media, still the me generation, optimistic, bit on the self-serving side. Main concern? Healthcare. Healthcare. Got to understand the generations. You really do. Here's Instagram. Look at the difference in rankings. Like for Gen Z, this is the 5th most influential brand in the country. For the boomers, it doesn't register. Here's CTV. It's the other way around. Here's Lululemon, 65 versus 127 with something in the middle that looks the same. Here we have Uber. Now, actually, Uber's been moving up for every generation over the years, but still, it's skewed to the younger cohort. Here we have Kellogg's. Canadian Tire. This is really a reflection of the fact that some of the younger cohorts don't and perhaps never will own a home. There's a lot of Gen Z that will never own a home, certainly in major cities in this country. Look, we could talk about the generations for the next half an hour, but I have to move on. We did have a number of movers and shakers this year. That is, brands that are not the most influential, but moved up really quickly this year. So here's ChatGPT. The last 3 years, it's gone from 46 to 17. Here's No Frills. It's gone up from 47 to 34. Not terribly surprising given the economic environment. Here's Sobeys in the past year. Not an influential brand, but moved up 18 spots in 1 year. Here's Sephora, that went from 107, not an influential brand, broadly speaking, but moved up a lot in 1 year, particularly among Gen Z. And here's Scotiabank, up almost 20 spots in 1 year. Not an influential brand, but boy, did they move in 2025. We could tell stories about all 5 of those brands. We don't have the time. I'm going to mention just 2 of them quickly. First is ChatGPT, which actually didn't move very much in 23 and 24, but it sure did in 25. And again, you can see here a big difference between the generations. Big influence in Gen Z, not so much in the older cohorts. So what kind of things was this brand doing? So they reached almost 1 billion people during the course of 2025. 1 billion people in 1 year. That is almost triple from the previous year. They partnered with NVIDIA in a $100 billion project to power the next generation models. They also, along with Intuit, brought specialized financial AI for complex financial related matters that we might be dealing with. They integrated into Stack to allow users to summarize conversations and manage files directly within the workplace. And they created the latest version of GPT, the most advanced one, which is kind of a reasoning model, if you like. ChatGPT. Here's what their influence profile looks like. Now, you may remember earlier, I showed you a slide that looked a little bit like this. I showed you the numbers that were on the bottom. The numbers on the bottom represent the degree to which these dimensions contribute to the influence of all 138 brands. The numbers in the bars reflect this brand's profile. So ChatGPT way over indexes on being leading edge. It does not index at all on being true north. It's not actually 0, but it's a number very close to 0. Here's Sephora. Sephora, as you can see here, we've only actually tracked Sephora for the last couple of years, and I showed you earlier it went up, some almost 20 spots in 1 year. But look where it sits for Gen Z. It's becoming an influential brand for Gen Z, and I have no doubt that this is purposeful, and no doubt that that's the case. So they were a founding partner this past year, and the official beauty partner of the Toronto Tempo. Sephora's Beauty Insider loyalty program has amassed some 40 million members between here and the United States. They released Holiday Hints as a campaign which transformed customer wish lists in a number of major Canadian cities, and they announced the Sephora Squad, essentially influencers, some of which they manage internally, some of which they manage through a number of different agencies. And indeed, they partnered with Uber to offer on-demand delivery of beauty products, both in Canada and, in fact, in the United States. And here's their profile. So they also over-index on being leading edge, but also on engagement. Can't resist but throw in the odd slide about the United States. Here's one of them. So Instagram, for the first time in the US, hits the top 10. TikTok in the US is the 13th most influential brand. In Canada, it's 29. Here's ChatGPT. We flip-flop. In the US, it's 40, here it's 17. Coca-Cola, a truly American brand. Number 17, number 14 in the US, 35 here. And in the US, the biggest gainers this year, in aggregate, were the car companies. The one I like best is the single biggest gaining brand in the US, Dunkin' Donuts. You think about the affordability crisis in the US, I mean, it makes sense. Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, I'm going to pause. Let's pause for a sec. And let's go back to Terry O'Reilly. So Terry O'Reilly spoke at a conference that I spoke at in the fall of last year. And he describes himself as an old ad man. Now, I don't think he's so old, but he certainly is an ad man. He really is. I don't know if you've ever seen Terry O'Reilly talk, but it's worthwhile. I mean, he spoke for 40 minutes. As far as I was concerned, he could have spoken for another hour. And all he spoke about was fun. And the point was that you guys should be having fun. What you do is fun. And if you're having fun, it reflects in what you do. And he gave several examples. I'm going to share one of them with you. Check this out. Turn the volume up, guys. Now, you have to believe that everyone who was involved in putting that together was having fun. You've got to believe it. Go see Terry O'Reilly if you get a chance. So let me introduce you to just a few of this year's most influential brands. Just before I do that, I should add that the last question that I asked each of the people that I interviewed this year was, and they couldn't prep for this, they didn't know it was coming, who do you think is the most influential brand? Regardless of who the 6,700 Canadians that we surveyed thought was, here's what they said.
ChatGPT,
Amazon,
Meta, Google,
ChatGPT, YouTube,
Amazon, Scotiabank.
So that's what they said. Now, what did Canadians tell us? So for the first time in a number of years, Tim Hortons is back as one of Canada's 10 most influential brands. They've kind of been hovering in that area for some time. They dipped out a few years ago, and they're back at number 10. So let's talk a little bit about what they did last year. Well, first they partnered with Ryan Reynolds. And as I said earlier, I think that was fortuitous because it was in play before the yo-yo effect of the Trump administration. But you know, the scrambled eggs campaign that he worked on was very much a success. They also had a number of pop-up merchandising stores. Now, they've always sold merchandise, but not in the way that they did last year. And that, too, was a very positive campaign for them. They released the Unspoken Canadian Dream campaign, which featured, again, two Canadians, Kiefer Sutherland, Bahamas, both, again, resulting in a very successful campaign. And they partnered with Flow to deploy electric vehicle fast chargers. That started, it's rolling out even more this year, but it started last year. I think there's 100 of them already in play or close to that. And last, but certainly not least, I mean, there were many things, we've just picked a few of them here, was the Orange Sprinkled Donut campaign, which raised close to $1 million for Indigenous organizations in one day. In one day. Here's what Tim Hortons' profile looks like. Here's a brand that way over-indexes on True North. And that's part of the reason that they are now one of Canada's 10 most influential brands. Of course, they have an enormous footprint in this country, over 4,500 locations, so a lot of presence, and, I might add, an enormous advertising budget. So a lot of presence. And if we dig just a little bit deeper on this brand to some of the attributes, what you see here in the pink part of that donut is the proportion of Canadians that associate this attribute with this brand. And the little number at the bottom, hopefully you can see that, that's the average across all 138 brands. So you'd consider this brand to be Canadian, 6 in 10. The brand helps support the Canadian economy and workforce, about the same. And 5 in 10 believe that that brand inspires a sense of Canadian pride. But very different from the numbers at the bottom that, as I said, reflect the average. Here we have some presence numbers. 7 in 10, we see this brand everywhere, versus 25% on average. 5 in 10, your family and friends use it, and 6 in 10, it advertises a lot. It does advertise a lot. Netflix is the 9th most influential brand, down a couple of spots from last year. So the guys at Netflix, what did they do? They certainly had campaigns with several partners to promote Wednesday. Does anyone watch Wednesday? Yeah. Usually a younger profile. I watch it too, funnily enough. Second, they collaborated with Subway to promote Happy Gilmore 2, which I actually thought was awful compared to Happy Gilmore 1, but nevertheless, most certainly a sense of nostalgia and a campaign that by and large worked for them. They prioritized diverse Canadian narratives through a launch of the True North documentary, which also worked really well from them. They expanded the TV service and ecosystem by integrating smartphone-controlled gaming. So you can play from your smartphone now. And last but not least, with all of this, they still managed to implement price increases, both on the non-ad side and on the ad side. Number 9, here's what their profile looks like. They over-index on being leading edge and engagement. I mean, if they weren't over-indexing on engagement, you'd have to wonder, given what business they're in. And so if you look at some of the specifics here, you can see trend setting, forever changing the landscape, and shaping consumer behavior. And in terms of, some of the engagement issues, interacted with the brand online, twice the average, having viewed ads and videos, again, twice the average, and 25% happy to support the brand. Walmart was the 7th most influential brand this year, down just 1 from last year. What kind of things did they do? Well, they partnered with Skip. To bring us stuff fast across their 300 stores. And Skip did more than you might think in this case. They didn't just pick up, but they packaged, they found, they bought, and they delivered, all from scratch. So back one. Everyday low prices, on average, they saved Canadians about $450 a year, on average. Walmart Canada launched its most advanced distribution center. This is a robotic center. It's like a giant vending machine for 130 stores that it services. And they partnered with Klarna to offer buy now and pay later. An approach perhaps more for the sophisticated and savvy younger cohorts than anyone else. But they also partnered with OpenAI. The word partnership I've used several times. That's a theme that ran through this year even more than we saw last year. Here's their profile. They way over-index on utility. They way over-index on presence. Some of these things are intuitive, some are not. So here we see, here's a brand that offers great value at 52%. It helps me save money, and it offers personalized product services. It also is one that you buy and use today. There's a strong future, and it understands what we need as consumers. The second most influential brand, and it's really close here, was Amazon. And what did Amazon do last year? I don't know if you guys saw the Lego stuff at Union Station. Anyone see that stuff? They made hay out of it, but it was a neat thing to see at Union Station. They had their first Canadian upfronts last year. They also announced a partnership with Netflix and Disney. I mean, many of us didn't see that one coming. I certainly didn't. And they launched Canada Showcase, which offered a whole bunch of Canadian brands on Amazon.ca. Here's their profile. They over-index on being trustworthy. They're the only e-commerce brand, actually, that over-indexes on being trustworthy, on utility, and on being leading edge. I'm going to skip a couple of slides because I do want to get to the end here. Google, for the 14th year in a row, congratulations, is the #1 most influential brand. Here was their market cap on December 21st of 2024. Here's their market cap on December 31st, 2025. I hope you guys have Google stock. I really do. I mean, it's rather astounding, to be honest. They were fueling tech education in this country through Empower. They really made a difference. 13 million bucks they invested. They partnered with TELUS on TELUS's old Critter campaign, but they used AI to do it. Rollout of AI mode was also big. It kind of transformed search into something that's much more conversational than we've seen in the past. And they also partnered with PayPal. And so what you have in some respects is, Google being the brain and PayPal being the kind of safe wallet scenario. Here's what their profile looks like. So if there is a magic mix, perhaps this is it. A healthy dose of trust, a healthy dose of being leading edge, and a little bit of empathy in the process. I'm going to skip these 2 slides. So here's the 10 most influential brands in 2025. Google, Amazon, YouTube, Apple, Facebook, Costco, Walmart, Visa, Netflix, and Tim Hortons. The 10 most influential brands of 2025. And just in case you're interested, here's the 10 most influential brands in the United States. A little bit different. A little bit different in order. A couple of slightly different players in there, but a little bit different. So, what might I leave you with? First, AI has shifted in this past year from novelty to necessity. Secondly, that being the case, tread lightly and don't let efficiency create a kind of a vanilla generic marketing in the process. Third, there is a power in aligning brand narratives with Canadian identity, even for American brands, if you can do that. Fourth, brands with the strongest gains in influence, they balance the kind of a commitment to Canada with a tangible economic benefit. We saw that sentiment without savings didn't really move the needle as much. 5 is that influential brands continue to build mutual partnerships. This is not 1 + 1 is 2. It's 1 + 1 equals a number that's much bigger. Whether it's Netflix with Wendy's and Cheetos, or Amazon with Netflix, or Google with PayPal, or Sobeys with there are so many of them. Partnerships are critical. 6 is that we've gone from content creators to orchestrators of intelligence. 7 is if you want to really generate more influence, you have to have generational harmony. If you're always going to focus on one generation, you'll never be a truly influential brand. And 8, as Penny said, and as I want to keep reiterating, never forget context. Your brand lives within the context of today. Which brings us back to here. Context is really important. Whether it's expressed in this photograph from 1932 or from this rendition in 2025, context is really important. But, so too is perspective. Because here's Charles Eberts, the photographic director for the Rockefeller Center Development. We wouldn't have the context if it weren't for his perspective. And similarly, here's Jason Sealing, an artist. That is not an AI-generated shot. That's a painting. At Ipsos, at the Globe and Mail, at Publicis, and the CMA, we all aim to provide you with an understanding of context and some perspective. Thank you very much for your time. And if you'd like to download some of the content before they switch this screen, this is the QR code to go to. Thanks again, guys.
What a terrific top 10, Steve. Many thanks for your inspiring presentation and for sharing what it takes for brands to be influential in Canada today. Your insights have given us lots to think about as we strive to grow influence for the brands that we lead. It was also great to see the brands that are making inroads and aspiring to knock some of the leaders out of the top 10. And I'm thrilled that the majority of brands in the top 10 and movers and shakers are members of the Canadian Marketing Association, which speaks to the high caliber and diversity of organizations that we have in our community. I'm Natasha Ruppel. I'm Chief of Memberships and Revenue at the Canadian Marketing Association. As the country's largest association for marketing, the CMA is the voice of marketing in Canada and elevates the role of both marketing and marketers. We're now going to bring the research to life with a panel discussion featuring CMOs and marketing leaders from an impressive group of leading brands in Canada, NYX, IKEA, Metro, and Ipsos. As marketing professionals, we have a unique ability to influence and inspire action, and I call on everyone in the room to do exactly that to defend our country and our economy. In keeping with that sentiment, we're in for a great discussion as our panel dive into what it will take for brands to drive more influence across Canada. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel, Brent Nelson, Global Chief Strategy Officer, formerly Edelman and Publicis Group. Brent operates at the fascinating intersection of commerce, culture, and society, transforming how organizations think about earned media creativity, not just making noise, but delivering measurable impact that actually moves the needle. What makes Brent's perspective particularly valuable for today's conversation is his belief that strategy should be more creative and creative should be more strategic. This philosophy has helped drive remarkable industry recognition, including 41 Cannes Lions and more than 150 effectiveness awards. When it comes to understanding what makes brands truly influential in today's landscape, Brent brings both the strategic rigor and creative vision needed to guide our discussion. Please welcome Brent Nelson. And our panelists joining Brent today include Janelle Ricketts, Head of Marketing for IKEA Canada, Alan Tadros, Vice President, Chief Marketing Officer and Digital Strategy for Metro Inc., Nicole Tapscott, Chief Commercial Officer for NYX, and Steve Levy for Ipsos Canada. Welcome to the stage.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. I would say this is probably the most important use of your time for the year, the most important event that's currently happening in Canada, because the world is obsessed with and talking about influence. How to gain it, how to manage it, how to play downside of risk in influencing other consumers, other markets, amidst a very volatile world. And I'll share some thoughts at the end of this discussion in Q&A, specifically about why I believe this event is the most important event going on in this country right now. But before I get there, and before the questions start, I'd just like to meet these incredible, gifted, talented thought leaders that we have the pleasure of talking with today in a sort of 10-second quick Q&A, just so that we understand them more as human beings than typically just names and assignments and titles on that. So Janelle, I'm going to start with you. And same question for everyone, 10 seconds or less. Are you an optimist, realist, or skeptic, and why?
I'm very much a realist. I think I like to be positive, but I also want to make sure people are prepared for the real situation so that we can deal with whatever consequences come from that.
Amazing. Alain?
I think I'm a realist. My wife would say differently probably, but I'm a realist.
I would definitely call myself an optimist. I think there are very few problems and challenges that even if you fail at making change in, that you can have a meaningful impact on. So I'm definitely an optimist.
Steve.
I'm a skepticalist. I sit somewhere between being skeptical and somewhere between realistic.
Perfect.
Does this align with our generational makeup?
Yeah, it does.
I know, it should be an interesting discussion already. We'll see if they hold true to type. Okay, I've got 6 questions. We may not cover all of them today, depending on how intense the conversation is. I'd encourage you to talk amongst yourselves, have contrarian points of view with yourselves as we sit in our little miniature living room this morning. I think as Steve had talked provocatively about influence and the drivers around influence, you know, if I look at other studies going on in the world, shall remain nameless, they're very similar to Steve's, though not as insightful. You know, in a world where consumers, you know, have effectively voted most brands replaceable. 75% of people say, you know, 70% of brands could disappear and people wouldn't care about that. You know, how are you thinking about brand influence in your organization? And what would you point to as proof in behavior of driving influence versus sentiment? Nikki, let's start with you.
Okay, great. Well, first, thanks very much for having me on the panel today. So obviously I'm with NYX. I look out in the audience and I see a lot of women. I'm assuming all women in the audience are familiar with NYX, right? All right, so maybe wearing it right now. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but just in case. And for the men out there, we're a women's intimates company. We were founded in 2013 and by Joanna Griffiths, the founder and CEO, and we've effectively become North America's #1 leak-proof brand. So we are bigger than any other brand in all of North America in terms of number of actual dollars made from leak-proof. And so the way that we look at influence is, you know, NYX was founded on a universal truth, which is that 100% of women will experience a leak at some point in their lives. And leaks can be, everybody, you know, blood, discharge, pee, sweat, all forms of kind of leaks. And when Joanna was fundraising in her first round, she went out to different fundraisers, to different independent investors, VCs, and the reaction that she got was this felt like a niche problem. And even though 100% of 50% of the population faced it. And so we had a really big uphill battle to climb. You know, how do we take a very commonplace thing that is now in the shadows and make it something that people can digest and talk about? So the influence had to effectively change the conversation to actually introduce a solution to then sell the product. Yeah. So that it wasn't as if you know, we talk about product market fit and, you know, problem aware, solution aware kind of in marketing. But in this instance, women were aware of the problem, didn't necessarily even realize it was a problem that could be solved and didn't have a solution that could effectively address it in a really meaningful way.
Yes.
So the way that we approached it was like based on our overall approach is always talking about the unpopular topic, getting it out there in the open and always basing it on the feedback and the words we were hearing from our customer. Yeah. And every campaign that we've ever launched since then has always been based on a universal truth and on a thing that we could tie what we were saying to. Yes. And I think the exciting part is in our most recent brand survey that we did, which I shared with you yesterday, Brent, you know, the #1 thing in Canada that women associate with NYX is not leak-proof. It's a brand that gets me. Yeah. And that is, it almost like I just gave myself a shiver. I'm like so proud.
Yeah. So let me stop you there.
That's exactly what we were trying to do, but never with the intention of doing it.
Yeah, so let me stop you there because I love that notion of, you know, a brand that gets me. Janelle, I mean, IKEA has a long enduring purpose of creating a better everyday for the many people. Mm-hmm. How are you keeping that influence alive and refreshing that purpose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you know, we're really fortunate as a brand that we do have that strong vision and purpose behind everything that we do. So it really helps to guide everything from there. And I think what I love about it is that it could be easy in this category to just focus on functional products and services that we offer, but it goes much more beyond that. And I think because we have this kind of rallying cry behind this idea of creating a better everyday life for the many people, it impacts everything that we do as a business. It helps with the decisions that we make. So whether it's the thoughtfulness that we put into the designs of the products that we make, or the care and the decisions we make throughout our supply chain, or how we show up in the communities that we serve, all of these things play a role because everyone in the organization knows that this is what we stand for, and then this is what we need to continue doing. And that's how we continue to have influence, not only across the world with IKEA, but also in Canada, in the communities that we operate in as well.
Alain, you're obviously a staple in people's lives, high visitation every day, a necessity. How are you looking at influence in grocery as a category?
To be honest, not much.
Yep.
That's the reality of it. We don't measure influence, we measure customer engagement. And that's the metric by which we'll look at. We are, 10 million transactions a week across about 6 different brands. Customers, there's table stakes today that we have to deliver on before influence in any way. When you look at the top influential brands that were on the board before that are retailers, Walmart and Costco, they have price confidence today in the market. You could be the most influential brand, have great content. If you don't deliver on table stakes today, and if consumers are looking for value, look at what's going on, then you're not going to move the needle. So we look at engagement. It's pretty easy. Marketing for us is easy. Bring people in through our doors, and when they're there, is make sure that they buy more. That's pretty much the basics 101 of what we do in marketing. And we measure whether we can actually bring consumers back, and whether they buy more, and whether they're more engaged with the brand, and where we bring them through that engagement funnel. Every single week, we get our report card at 6 a.m. every morning that says, okay, did we move that needle today or not? And we look at our loyalty scores and all of that. And I think that'll drive partial influence, but it's not about, back to your point, table stakes.
Yep.
We're not about, on the innovation scale, or we don't push the needle or shake the cage too much. We just try to show up and deliver on the basic stuff that consumers need every day. Otherwise, we'll lose their confidence if we don't.
I love that. Engagement as an output of influence is a great measurement to look at. I'm going to flip the script a bit because, Steve, you gave us a fairly provocative video sort of the state of the world and Canada and things going on. And yes, I don't understand that relationship either with Prime Minister. The reality is right now, I think for all of us in the room, and I have a great amount of empathy for CMOs at the moment, because budgets are flat, paid is inflating, always on tends to be always invisible or always ignorable. Just because you can doesn't mean you should pump more content out. Be wary of that. And platforms and influencers can flip brand sentiment overnight, or likely in 5 seconds if you're in the world of crisis. So I want to talk about risk and influence. What's the single biggest volatility risk to your brand influence right now? And what are you doing in looking at de-risking that when you engage influencers or creators or looking to exert influence? Alain, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I'll take a step back. Digital has completely changed the way we market. If I take a step back for the last 10 years, 15 years, and the way we go about it, it's changed everything. So yes, and you know what, the downside is that it's great, it's exciting, there's lots of platforms, there's a multiplication of these touch points for consumers, there's lots of, it's the social and content is really exciting, but it's complexified the way we actually can reach out to consumers. And it's pushed us to driving a lot more marketing efficiency, and it's brought in creative to be a lot more vanilla, right? So, and that's the stuff I push my teams on all the time. It's great, all this content you're doing. How much of it is really, really relevant? And how much of it really moves the needle? Because you could spend your day justifying all the stuff that you do. How much of it really is worth doing at the end? So when you look at back in the days, it was all about 3-4 medias. It was pretty much paid above the line, and you used to do great creative. Today it's about very small percentage of it. The rest is all below the line. Yeah. That you measure.
How have you weathered the storms, though, when I think of your category in particular and influence, weathered the storms of the media lines of increasing food prices constantly?
I'll tell, and it's boring for marketers, but you know what? Food, our sales increase 2 to 3% a year. Call it about that, right? Inflation's higher than that, but let's say average, grocery, if you get 2-3% growth is great. If I show up and I come to our CEO and I ask him for 7%, 8% increase in marketing budgets next year, I say, what the hell are you talking about? How can you actually come up with 8% increase in marketing when our sales are increasing 2 to 3? Where's the leverage? Where is the efficiency you bring in it? So it pushes us to rethink how we go to market with all of the stuff that we do. And that's what's pushing a lot of the digital shift. It questions a lot of the content that we do. It questions creative. So every dollar we spend today, every campaign that we do needs to get more effective, needs to be more creative, needs to move the needle, and the needle on engagement at the end to say, okay, did I actually move the needle? But then you need to say, okay, it doesn't have to necessarily translate in sales, but what am I going to measure against that I can then say this has been a success? So that's where it's pushing us a lot. Fear is that, you know, we do, it does tend to make us vanilla sometimes, and sometimes we say, hey, you know what, we just can't, we can't go there.
Yep. Janelle, Nikki, I mean, you're two very visible, talked about in the media, always on virtually every platform as a topic. You know, how are you looking at de-risking influence and ensuring that you have sustainable influence over time? Janelle, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and you know, when we were looking at this question, I was thinking about it from a little bit of a different angle, especially as a global brand. And I think one of the risks that we often face is this dilemma that you have about how do you maintain the integrity of this big global brand, but then also how do you stay relevant to Canadians? Which I think is a struggle for many who have worked in that type of environment. And, you know, for us, it's been really important in terms of, you know, mitigating some of that risk is to ensure that we're setting aside budget every year. And again, like many marketers, we never have enough for sure. So we're always trying to do more with that, but we always prioritize ensuring that we can develop local work. We think it's really important that we are, you know, making emotional connections with Canadian consumers, understanding their lives at home, and really getting deep into those insights that are really relevant to them. And so I think that has been a big priority for us to help balance that, still keeping in mind what we're trying to do as a brand globally, but then making sure that Canadians feel seen and understood by IKEA. And a recent example of that for us was we decided to you know, dedicate money and actually for the first time ever develop a brand campaign specifically for Quebec. Which can be tricky, and you know, and even having those internal conversations to kind of get the green light to be able to do that was, you know, was quite something. And we did it, and it's been really a great journey for us, and some great learnings in that, because we were really able to zone in on insights that are very specific to Quebec. Even internally, when we have to explain the idea, we have to explain why this is funny, and you know, different cultural nuances about people in Quebec in terms of why this makes it work. And we've had really great response to this, and now we're kind of continuing down that road with this concept of IKEA. And it's just been incredible, the feedback that we've gotten from people, and people who know, they know in the market, and you know, getting that feedback. And even from our own coworkers, they're just so proud of it because they say, oh, wow, you get us, you understand us. So I think that for us, that is really big, making sure that we still find that opportunity to be locally relevant. Otherwise, we could really risk, you know, how our brand appears here in Canada and how it resonates.
Yeah, Nikki, a quick 1 minute point of view from you.
Sure. So I think the biggest risk for a brand like Nix that's very consumer facing is relevancy in the fight for attention. So, you know, I think a great example, right, is recently Sydney Sweeney launched Siren, her lingerie company. And it was not enough that Sydney Sweeney launched a lingerie company. It was, and that she was in the lingerie. She had to then take over the Hollywood sign and cover it in bras and underwear to have it be attention grabbing. So like, what are the rest of us supposed to do? So I think when we talk about relevance, we look at kind of the history. Nix has always been a community first brand. And what we mean by that is not just influencers and ambassadors, which make up all of the people that we cast in our ads, but also our customers and people who actually like engage with the product. Yep. And so, you know, 10 years ago when the brand started, the power was in the follower count, right? It was all about who you worked with, micro, macro, exactly as described well by Steve. But now it's no longer, the power is not in necessarily the hands of the creator, it's in the power of the content. So most creators actually get like a sub 1% view through rate on their content now, because it's all based on what the algorithm thinks you're gonna like.
Yep.
So it doesn't really matter who you follow or how many followers you have. It's all about the quality of the content you put out there, and if it's gonna be relevant for your audience, and the volume at which you put out there. And so which puts huge amount of pressure on marketers to create high quality, voluminous content is not cheap. It's expensive, but if that is what the market is looking for, and that's the way that people are engaging now, then that's how we have to also meet our communities. So, 10 years ago, if we were to do a campaign with Kristen Bell that we did last year, or Megan Rapinoe that we did the year before, posted on Instagram, 1 million followers who follow us would have seen it. Now, I'm sure all the women in this room follow Nix, and probably you see our content every once in a while, because it's no longer about if you follow us or not.
Yeah.
It's based on what you actually see. A fun game I love to play, which I recommend you play with your friends at your next dinner party, is TikTok roulette, all right? So you open up your TikTok and you pass it one person to the left, and they get to swipe through the first 10 things they see in your For You page. It's the fastest way to get to know someone really quickly.
I love that game.
And every single person is gonna have a different, even if you all follow the same people, you're going to have a very different experience. Mine is going to be an obsession with protein and perimenopause. Yours is going to be something very different. And it doesn't matter what I follow. This is what Instagram thinks I care about. If there's anybody on Instagram here, I'd like to have less protein and perimenopause content in my feed. Take it away. And so right now we have to compete with that.
Absolutely.
And so that relevancy and attention is the biggest piece that we always think about. Like, does this matter?
Yes.
Who's going to see it? Who's it for?
Yep.
Even more so than ever before.
Yes. Steve.
Well, I was going to say, I can't substantiate this, but my wish would be that brands take more risks to generate influence. And again, anecdotally, my sense is that actually we're seeing brands take less risk than they used to.
Completely.
And so my wish would be more.
I think that's what I have always appreciated about Nix, and I think when I first found out about the brand, I respected that they were taking those risks, showing bodies that hadn't been shown before that you might want to hide in the past, and being able to see women that really reflect what you look like, talking about taboo topics that no one wants to talk about, but it's a reality for everyone. And I really appreciated that so much. And I think, Nicole, you get to benefit as well from, that word of mouth from people. As I said, I am wearing Nix. I have 2 pieces on right now. I own quite a few pieces.
We love that.
But I will tell everybody about that because I love the products, they work, and I just love the approach. And I think there's an amazing way that you can capitalize on that as well. And I don't think every brand has the ability to have that kind of talkability that you do, but a lot of it was from those earlier days of the work you've done and how you've evolved that over time.
God, now I feel like I should be wearing Nix.
Well,
but they have men's now.
I feel a little unsupported, Nikki.
You will be at some
Okay,
point soon,
perfect.
trust me.
Yeah, the shapewear is amazing.
I need shapewear, clearly. I'm like a vowel.
I do think that some brands, and Nix would be one of them, just by the very nature of their business, is more able to take those kinds of risks. And other categories, and the one I have in mind is insurance, perhaps. It's harder for an insurance company to do that. That said, last year at Cannes, there was a wonderful case study of an insurance company in Scandinavia that launched a new product that was both risky and influential. And what they did was they provided an insurance product that women could buy that insured them against abuse.
Being kicked out of their home.
Wow.
Yeah. And the concept was, you make a call, you're being abused, and you're immediately whisked away to a safe place, a safe haven that you can live in and you're provided for. That very out of the box for an insurance company, somewhat risky, very influential.
Yeah, I love that example, because what you're talking about, and I think what you're all hinting at today as well, is find a real problem that you can solve for people and that you have credibility in solving for people, right? Because the conversations already exist. And on the point on risk, I agree, Steve. I think the biggest risk is taking no risk, right? As
Yeah.
Ogilvy said, the worst sin in communications is not being seen, is being invisible. And if you watch people on the airplane, I love this experiment. When you're sitting there, I pity if you're advertising on the airlines, I don't know. Everyone's doing this. Skip, 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 skip. It's ignorable content. But I'll flip again the script, because the segue, Steve, is a perfect setup for this. I mean, it is a permission economy right now in terms of people opting in, opting out for sharing data, who's following, who's going to advocate for you, who's going to take you down as an internet troll. You know, showing up everywhere can really dilute influence. You can't be everything to all people. And silence also can be a strategy. Not having a point of view on things is a point of view.
Yep.
So when is your rule to show up versus step back in culture? And what's the hardest moment where you've decided not to speak? Janelle.
Sure. Yeah, this is always a tricky one. And I think a lot of it comes down to, almost having some rules in place in terms of, where you're willing to, where you're not. And, and a lot of things I think often have to come down to your values and who you are as a brand. I think that helps define a lot of things for you. And you can figure out where you have some permission to play there as well. And there's lots of times we have discussions within our team, is this something we should do? But a lot of times it comes down to, what's IKEA's role in this? Do we have a clear point of view? Does anybody care? All of these things, because sometimes you see brands try to get in on like everything, and then you don't, you're like, what do you stand for? What does this mean? I have a very silly kind of example of that. So it's not maybe the hardest one where we've stayed silent, but we're all familiar with the Coldplay concert debacle and everything that went down with that. And it was really interesting to sit back and watch so many brands jump in the conversation in different ways. A lot of people trying to find humor in the situation. And we did have those conversations as well. Like, is this something that we would want to do? And I think very quickly we were all aligned, like, this is not the place for us. And again, it came back to our values as well. And we thought, how terrible for us to poke fun and jump into a situation that actually hurt a lot of people. And it was a really difficult situation. As much as people wanted to make fun of it, there's people who are really hurt by everything that went down with that situation. That's not our place to be in that conversation. And we bowed out of doing that despite what we were seeing around us with other brands.
We're very risk averse. And we have a strategy to go silent. And we've had opportunities when you think about tariffs.
Yes.
When you think about, the whole Buy Canadian, we didn't want to go out and promote ourselves. We are Canadian brands. We're Canadian retailer, largest in Quebec. And we said, we think people know that. How do we bring utility to that versus promoting that we are Canadian? And then when you get to it, you say, okay, well, it's pretty complex. So we said, you know what, we're just going to try to find ways to be useful in consumers' lives versus taking advantage of it. We've had also with even with Trump in the U.S. and we had the LGBTQ2+ community at Metro say, okay, what are you guys going to do? We had different groups come to us. Okay, you guys going to be speaking out on behalf of these groups? And we said, no, we're going to sway away from all of that. We're not a brand that'll surf on culture and what's going on. We got to deliver every day. Otherwise, if you do that and then you're taking advantage of it and you don't deliver on what I would call as table stakes as a brand or what people expect you to deliver on and what you define as your value equation, then I think you're going to be beside the track. And that's not, and if we're a fashion brand, if we're, luxury cosmetics, we'd probably be different. But, and as I think you and I chatted about that, we're not Benetton, right? I'm not going to go out and, I'm a food and pharmacy retailer that needs to deliver every day on goods. So that's the kind of line that we take when we go at it.
If you could bring the price of broccoli crowns down, I'd be very appreciative.
We went to a parliamentary commission, right, on pricing. So we're
surprised.
very, very we're criticized very quickly, right? So that's things that we're careful about.
Brilliant. Nikki, the same question. What's your rule for when you show up and step back?
I think that if it challenges the mission of the business, then there's an obligation to say something. So Nix's mission is to empower our community to live unapologetically free. And so when we see things that are an affront to that for our community, then we say something. Before Nix, I was at Missouri, so similar, very female-focused women's empowerment brand. We have, at the time, we have huge social engagement at Missouri as well. It's a jewelry company. I saw a few women wearing things on my way in. Our top post during my 4 years I was there was when we made a comment in the Roe v. Wade decision.
Yeah.
And so we were one of the very first brands to say something publicly on social, and it remains one of Missouri's top engaged posts, only to be beaten by Taylor Swift wearing our heirloom ring.
No one could compete against Taylor Swift.
That was tough. But, you know, there was and we received backlash for it, for sure. The majority of Missouri's revenue comes from the U.S. We received, reaction from that. But it was, I think, when decisions are easy to make internally, they're illustrative of a really clear through line. And that decision on the Roe v. Wade comment, I texted Nora, the founder, who was on holiday in Jordan at the time, and I said, I think we should say something. And she was like, yep. And that was what it was. I think it's when there's a tremendous amount of internal debate that all of a sudden it starts to show fissure in what your mission really means.
Yes.
And that's when it starts to create those cracks in if you should say something or not.
Yeah, I know we've got a minute 53 before we answer it up to questions. I do want to ask this question because, Janelle, I know you and I talked about it, and this is a bit of maybe a controversial question, but I want to ask it anyways, is there's no doubt that DEI is in a credibility reset right now. I mean, you cannot pick up any newspaper globally with a company that's looking at, are we sticking with it? Are we abandoning it? Are we sticking with it? And often it's being criticized as highly ideological. In some countries, depending on left or right-leaning politicians, it's been described as necessarily too woke or performative. What does a DEI strategy actually look like in 2026 that's credible?
Yeah, I think this is something that so many organizations are trying to figure out right now with so many pressures around them. And I certainly don't have all the answers or a magical playbook on what that looks like. But I think there are certainly some foundational things that need to be there. I think, one of the things is that it really needs to align with your values as an organization. And I think if it's not there, it's not going to pick up the momentum internally or even be believable to consumers as well. And it also needs to be really embedded throughout the organization. This is not the job of HR or your DEI team to do. This is something that everyone needs to play a role in. I think, when I had come into my role about 2.5 years ago, it's not like someone came and said, here's your playbook, how you can bring our ED&I strategy to life in marketing. No one does that. So we have to have, understand the base of the strategy, then have the ability to be empowered by leadership to then figure out how do I bring the strategy to life in the work that I do and that we can have an impact with that. The other thing, it needs to be funded. I think that goes without saying that a lot of times that is where, the money kind of comes back from. And it's not, you can't do much if you don't have some proper funding behind it. And I think ultimately it just comes down to, not having those strategies just live on a piece of paper somewhere. It's really about those intentions that you have written down and actually turning that into concrete actions. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your customers are proud of the work that you're doing, but even more important, that your coworkers, also feel good about the work that you're doing. Because I think, even for us, that has been such a source of pride for our coworkers, where they see, oh, you see me, and you're actually trying to do something. You're speaking out in the world about these issues that impact me in my life. And it creates this, extra loyalty, I think, to us as a company from that perspective. So, I don't think there's a magic formula there, but again, I think it's really about turning those intentions into action, and what you do is actually going to show what it's all about.
I love that, because many people are voting now on the basis of influence on that is, are you for me or against me?
100%. And we've had discussions too, even coming back to this vision of creating a better everyday life for the many people. We specifically said the many people, not some people. Not a certain class of people, or if you belong to this community or that community. It's the many people. So I think that again comes back to how it guides the decisions we make and where we put a stand down.
Great. Listen, I've got 8 minutes left, and I want to turn it over for Q&A from the audience, because we've got some amazingly talented people here today that have a tremendous amount of learnings to share. So I'd open it up for any questions from the audience. Yes, sir. Maybe there's a mic working its way? If not, just scream.
Hear me? I think I got a little too close. So we have microphones for questions. I'm going to work this side of the room. My colleague's going to do the other. But we have a question on the virtual, so I thought I'd ask that one first.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, here we go. This is for everybody. It's from Jordan Taylor, and the question is, what are the marketing decisions that are most likely to lead to real influence for a brand? Who would like to take that?
Sorry, we didn't. Can you repeat it?
Can you repeat that,
Marketing
please?
decisions, yeah.
Maybe I'm talking too fast. I had too much coffee. What are the marketing decisions that are most likely to lead to real influence for a brand?
I'm not sure what we mean
that's
by
a
marketing
marketer's
decisions.
decision.
There's a lot of decisions. I'm not sure what we mean by marketing decisions. It's tough for me to answer. I don't know. Maybe it's my French, though. Maybe.
No, it's not.
Well, maybe the next one will be in a line with it. So is there a question on the other side of the room?
There's a
Jeanette
gentleman
has
right
a
over
mic
here
on?
that had a question. He had a strong voice as well.
Thank you very much. Great panel. Peter Rodriguez from Brand Igniter. How do you ensure when you take a stance as a brand, if you decide to speak, not to be silent, how do you decide how to avoid alienating part of your customer base? Especially in Canada when we only have 45 million people. And I'd love to hear your insight. Thank you.
I can start that off. I think, again, like I said, when it aligns with your values, I think it becomes an easy decision on where to do that. Very recently, we really went out there again to just kind of reconfirm our commitment when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion. And, we wanted to make it clear we're not stepping back. Despite what's happening, in the world around us, what other organizations are doing, we are not stepping back from those initiatives. And that was so easy for us to do. And I think a lot of times it also comes back to standing for our coworkers. We've had pushback different times in the past, even how we've supported the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Yep. And I've had handwritten letters sent about how people didn't want to see same-sex couples depicted in our work. And, when we see those, when they say, oh, I'm not going to shop with you anymore, I'm done with IKEA. And I said, oh, well, so be it, because, this is what we stand for. We don't care. So, of course, with those decisions, we are going to alienate people because there's a lot of people who aren't going to see our point of view. But when it comes back to our values and how we can stand up for our coworkers, and for society, we have something in our values that actually talks about caring for people and planet. And so we feel, an innate responsibility to be able to do that. So that helps us make those decisions, and it makes it an easy decision.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I agree. I would just say you probably will alienate someone.
Yeah.
And you just have to feel okay with that. I think there's very little that you can do where you take a strong stance about anything where everybody is going to agree with you. So you
if I could take that answer and maybe tie it to the marketing decisions question, but I think if you bring it back to your mission as a brand, as an organization, I think that's what guides every decision. So for us, as an example, is how do you contribute to the health and well-being of communities? So any decision that we'll make in our marketing spend, in what voice we take, will always be back to that mission of saying, how do we contribute? You'll get even companies that come to you for different sponsorships, or people that want donations, or whatever you're going to support is always going to go back to that. So as an example, and we're not strong in sports. If we're going to sponsor sports, it'll be women's sports to be able to move the needle on participation of women and being more active in sports and so forth. If we'll contribute, we've committed to giving 1% back of our benefits pre-tax back to charities. So we've given away $82 million worth of food back to food banks because of consumers having difficulty feeding their families. We've given close to $18 million in just cash donations generated from our customers when we actually collect at store, but also half of that coming from corporate donations as well. So because as long as it comes back to what you stand for as a brand, I think that's the guide for the decisions that you make every day.
Yeah. Good to see you again, Peter. I mean, one thought on that as well is, my dad used to say, values are only worth something when it costs you something. And I think that's a pivotal moment for brands right now, because if you look at, most of the world right now, for second and third economy nations, polarization has never been as extreme. And when you look at stats, even in the United States, of will I help someone who has a different political viewpoint than me, the overwhelming majority of people say no. I will not help them. So to Steve's point, you have to make a choice based on your values, your purpose, your vision, or your mission on who your true customer is, because you're never going to satisfy everyone. And then, Peter, when you do try and do that, people are very fast to sniff out corporate cosplay, right? They'll talk about, what you intend to do on your website, and then they're like, what have you done? Like, point to something, right? This is critically acute, particularly in environmental and CO2 emissions. I mean, most people have figured that one out now and going, yeah, really? What are you doing? I love the website with trees and children playing in, Elysian fields, but what have you really done? And you get trolled for that, right? So if I always say, my dad used to say this too, it's like, talk less, do more. Yep. And I think that's something I talk to brands a lot about too, is don't publish results, not intentions.
We're bad at talking. We're more about doing than saying.
Yep.
That's what we are, and maybe we need to do a better job at it. We just opened up, I think last year in 2025, 3 community kitchens, where we're actually going out and building community kitchens to feed the communities. We didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in our annual report. We might do a press release, but we don't do it. We have an objective to build 14 of those in the next couple of years. But we don't go out and promote it. We probably should.
You should.
We probably should, but we choose what we talk about.
I think that doing is the right thing. But if you're going to do good things, then you got to tell people that you're doing them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed. Maybe you should talk to Brett again after this and get that sorted out. Are there any more questions from the audience? It's such a great opportunity.
Any questions? Oh,
yes.
I see someone in the back row.
Two people from the back.
Oh, I'm getting back here first.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for your insights. Irina from marketing at TD. My question is for Janelle. I'm a big follower of IKEA, customer, and I'm always amazed how quick you guys are at commenting on cultural moments, events. I just had a bunch in my feed from the Super Bowl, IKEA Chile, IKEA Colombia are all right there. What's the secret sauce? How do you move so quickly?
I think, part of it is that we have some guardrails in place. So we kind of know the types of moments we want to lean into and what feels right for us as a brand. So it already creates, some momentum there in terms of, and sometimes, if it comes to something like the Super Bowl or the Olympics or, things like that, then at least we can plan those things in advance. But we also have things in place to make sure that we can chat. And in fact, a couple of people from my team are right here, and we literally have a Teams chat going. That we call reactive social posts. Very clever. But we could use a rebrand maybe. We'll look into that.
It works.
Yeah, but it just brings some key stakeholders together so we can bounce these ideas off of each other. Because we might see something that's happened hey, should we do something? And it's good because we challenge each other as well. Because we think, yeah, this is not for us. Let's not get into it. And we also have support even from our global team. But sometimes if there's more global types of events happening, they even might, develop something that we could jump on board, and we share within other countries as well, where it makes sense. So it's definitely something that we have a lot of fun with, and something that we play with a lot more than we had in the past.
Yeah. I know there was another question at the back. There's another, yes.
Coming with your microphone.
Oh.
Hi there. My question is about communications efficiency. So Steve, you mentioned that in order to be an influential brand, you need to appeal or at least be visible to 4 generations. Now, Nicole, you said Instagram doesn't think that you're interested in certain things and thinks you are very much so interested in a couple of things. So how do you navigate the challenges that thinking AI poses i.e. how do you approach the audiences or be visible to the audiences that the AI just doesn't think your product is relevant to?
Who's that a question to?
Everybody.
I'm happy to jump in there. So, NYX as a brand, we do try to address all life stages. So we have our KT brand, which is teen. We have obviously the KW brand NYX, which addresses both adults, perimenopause, menopause, postpartum, even the silent generation, those poor guys. And
what did you look at me? Why'd you look at me? Did you see her look at me at that point?
Burn, Nikki, burn.
Anyway, and we do try to address all life stages, and that's not free. So when we do major brand campaigns or major brand moments, we try to actually cast for diversity and inclusion across age, across race, and so we do try to position, and usually we cast through our community. So we've had, last year we had over 30,000 people apply to be in NYX ads. And so in those major brand storytelling moments, we try to represent everyone who could need the product. And then when we get more into that, let's call it mid-funnel space, we create content that's digestible based on honestly, it's very straightforward, based on problem solution, right? So it's we use our community and we do ads and creative that address specifically and speak directly to that audience group. And it's a different way of creating content now that we never used to do before. The majority of the ads that you see from NYX on social are now via what we call KGC, which is NYX generated content. It's like UGC, but we make it with our audience and with our community. And we have a very, very high output level now. We're releasing, in comparison to some of the brands I speak to in the US, not a lot, but we're releasing 20 pieces of new video content every week for social. So it's a different way of doing production, and that involves systems and process and change internally. And it wasn't easy just to turn on the lights and do it that way, but we've had to be able to work in the new ecosystem, which is bound to change in 6 months again.
Yes.
So.
Steve, I think, look, I said earlier, if you want to be truly broadly influential, you need to have some sense of generational harmony. That said, for many brands in many categories, that's not practical. Sephora is never going to have the same influence as Tim Hortons, but they may have the aspiration to be the most influential in their own category. So it could be an aspirational issue as much as anything else.
Yeah, I'm going to flip the script a bit on that because I love that question. And, Steve, you can speak to it far better than I. But, often or not, there are values and needs that cross generations, right? If I look at my mom and dad who are 85, they share more in common with a Gen M audience than they do their own cohort. So that's one. I think embedded in your question is a deeper question, which I think we all need to sort out in AI, which is not necessarily the problem of a reinforcing algorithm, because we all know what it's like to be in a gated community, and those just reinforce the walled garden of what I believe through the algorithm. I want to reverse the question and say, what are we going to do in the world of AI summation search? Because we've all seen the data, right, where SEO is still critically important, but geo on the rise. You can't buy your way into an AI summary. So if I Google best airline to fly, there's no amount of paid that's going to get you into that earned summary. You have to earn your way into that. So if any of those targets, that's the best way I can say to go cross-generational. If everyone flies, if they're interested, you need to ensure you're in the top 3 in that AI summary, specifically when the platforms are now embedding real-time commerce into that. So I see, yep, airline number 1's got a sale, click to connect, purchase my ticket, right? That's happening in real time. So you need to figure out, that's the more important conversation I'm obsessed with, is how do you show up in that AI summation when people are making, that purchase cycle condense in almost like a black hole, an event horizon, where all laws of physics disappear, all laws of marketing disappear at that point too, because you may have zero awareness, but if you're top in the AI summary, who cares? I know that's apocryphal to say, but it's crazy things I'm thinking about and talking to many clients about is how do we deal with this new reality? Because it is changing consumer behavior.
17% of our website visits are robots currently scraping today.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, and they're scraping for content so that we can appear in AI search or
Yes.
regular search. And that's something we need to tackle. So it's even the debates back. See, if we look back at 20 years ago, we didn't want Google to come and scrape. We were, oh my goodness, what are we going to do, and how do we appear and optimize that? Today, it's table stakes. Same thing's going to happen with AI, and I think we'll have debates on that. If I was a luxury, a fashion brand, that one SKU that you'll buy, I would be worried about agentic AI and the impact that it will have. So you're looking for a new Louis Vuitton purse, you'll just ask the robot to search it, tell you where you'll buy it for cheap, they'll do all the work. Travel, those kinds of purchases, where it's that one item that consumers are looking for, I think is going to be affected a lot. Building a basket of 35 items and then pre-shopping it or shopping it across different retailers, we have a little bit of leeway in front of us before the AI does that. But for brands that are there, I think you got to hone in on that and take it and run with it, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to insight that you've all talked about as well. Like in Europe right now, in automotive in particular, people aren't searching like best mileage. They're starting to search for, I'm planning on having 2 kids. I only want to buy one vehicle that has to last me 15 years. What? That's a totally different search behavior than we've ever seen before, and up it pops. And I think, that may be the same for, I need a kitchen that's going to last for 25 years because I'm in there every day and I love to cook. I'm looking for the best selection of ethnic foods and I only want to make one stop, right? I'm looking for underwear, fashion wear, athleisure that's going to last me more than 2+ years without looking like it's 2+ years. I mean, those are the types of things we're thinking about. Any other questions? Yes. I see that you're getting approached from behind, sneakily.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Emma from MSL. Nice to see a fellow publicist folks here. I just have a question about, we've talked a lot about digital and AI, and then going back to Alain, your comment on, showing up versus speaking about it. How relevant to your areas is showing up in person now? Because given the influence of different generations and their focus, is that on the rise in your opinion or what you've seen, or is digital really the way of the future?
For us, so Nix has gone from 4 stores 2 years ago to 19 stores. We'll be at 30 stores by the end of this year. And so retail is extremely important to the ecosystem. I think, like a lot of D2C brands that were formed in those mid-teens, we started our retail journey thinking of retail as more like a showroom versus a shopping experience. And that quickly evolved as we started, again, talking to our customer. And when she came in, she wanted to be sized. She wanted to talk about very intimate issues. She felt safe in the space. And so we saw that this was an actually amazing way to extend the brand and the brand experience into that in-person experience. And we've seen that even more so with the adoption and kind of mass growth of the KT business. The Nix teen business, where moms are coming in with their daughters, they're making first period kits, they're getting ready for summer camp and overnight, where these conversations are often assisted in a almost like a community environment versus just a one-on-one, let's look on the internet together and pick a product.
Yep.
And so we have found the in-store experience and the IRL experience to be critical for our expansion. Anytime we open a store, e-commerce sales rise, store sales rise. Our customer lifetime value is strongest in the multi-channel shopper. And so we are going to continue to invest in that experience for sure.
We take it the other way around. So, we're fortunate. We have 1,600 stores across 3 provinces.
It's a lot.
We have,
I have 19. Very proud.
So millions of consumers coming in and spending anywhere between 15 to 40 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever it is, shopping in our stores. So, the best brand campaign of the most influential social campaign, you don't deliver at store every day, you're not going to go very far. So we're a very operationally driven company, but the store is our greatest media when you think about it. And that we need to hone in on. We need to make sure that we own it, and digital is not going away. So how does digital create a better omni-channel experience? Not only online, how do I bring that experience to store? Because consumers are, yes, looking for value, bring me value, make my life easier, and be more relevant to me. So, and so then when you look at that, that's how we've taken it. It's okay, we're operators. Now, how do we use digital to even make our stores even stronger, because we have that asset that's a strong asset for us. So we know that an omni-channel customer that buys online, that is, is subscribed to our email, that looks at our posts and so forth, as we bring them through this funnel, are worth more. So the idea is bringing them in within our ecosystem, that digital is a driver behind that makes our stores even stronger, and then kind of work that entire ecosystem. So, and that's the thinking behind when we launched our loyalty program just about in 2024 here, which is more rewards, and we launched in Quebec. We have 5 million active customers, engaged loyalty members today, that we want to own the relationship and just grow that over time, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of where we are. So digital is not there. When I, just as an anecdote, and I won't give you the digital percentage today, but when I started way back at Metro, 16% of what we invested was in digital. Today, it's almost completely, and the rest was in traditional media. So today, it's, and sorry for traditional media if you're in the audience, doesn't mean we still invest quite a bit, but it's the flip side, right?
Steve, Janelle, any last?
As you say, notwithstanding the comments that Alain just made, and you can judge this for yourselves when we upload the 10 interviews that we did with CMOs, but one of the themes was most certainly it's in person.
Yep.
People are not walking away from in person, whether it's selling services and products or marketing services and products. In person, not going away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have the same perspective at IKEA too, and we have even less stores than everyone. And that can be tricky because you want to expand and reach more customers, but it's hard to build a big blue box, and it takes a long time to be able to do that everywhere. So we're doing a lot of experimentation with other store formats right now, but we do look at that the store is the peak experience. And how many of you have spent a considerable time in IKEA at any given time? Yeah. We keep you there with the food, so you keep looking around. You get lost in the maze, all of that. And but that's done very much on purpose. And I think compared to a lot of other retailers at IKEA, it really is about that experience. And we always joke almost when you go to a party, you don't want to tell someone you work at IKEA because they have a story for you right away. One time, So we hear those things, but that's the thing. You hear those people who are they're actually making memories when they come to our stores. People talk about their grandmother taking them for meatballs on a Saturday afternoon, or how they met their future partner while shopping. There's so many of those kinds of moments, and it is the best experience. And I think especially because when we look at the feedback that we get from our customers, one of the number one things that they say about the store experience is that they love meeting and interacting with our coworkers, and you can't do that online. It's not quite the same experience. So we want people to still come, and there's people that still want to touch and feel before they make certain decisions as well. It can be tough to buy a sofa just from the palm of your hand. You want to make sure that you can lie back and have a family night of movies together. Absolutely. And that's going to work, right?
I think shopping has been mischaracterized as a transaction. I'm not saying it isn't. Sometimes it is, but often it is an experience. It's social in some cases, and it's a safari. I mean, it's more than just a transaction in many cases.
Yep. So I know I got 31 seconds left. Thank you,
poor gentleman,
for that. I do just want to say on your point too, also maybe flip the script and thinking like digital is not a medium, it's a mindset, right? When I look at Steve saying Instagram, I think memory's bad, Steve, I apologize, but I think maybe 8th most influential amongst the younger cohort. Did I get that near right?
I think something like, I can't remember offhand either.
Like that. It's a mindset. So we all have to originally think about that. It's not a channel or a medium, it's a mindset in everything we explore. And I love what you've all said about the in-store piece. When you look at those younger cohorts in particular, there's a loneliness pandemic that's occurring, and the only outlet for them in many places is the store. In fact, we're seeing retailers in New York right now creating the store, welcoming people to sit in on all the furniture and just hang out. It's become hangout space for a generation and shopping place, so it fulfills two needs. I did want to follow up, just as I promised, in 3 seconds. I just share why I think today. And thank you all for your time. It's probably the most valuable use of your time because it has been for me. Just listening to all of you, I've learned so much from all of you. So thank you very much. We're here to talk about brand influence right now because the biggest threat right now to brands isn't competition. I could care less whether you got a flanker brand here or here or here or here. It's indifference. That close button, that X on every single page that you get on the website has more brand equity than many brands in the world right now. The X is stronger than any of the ads, paid, owned, or earned. And spend doesn't buy attention anymore. $1.4 trillion invested globally this year, and many people are installing ad blockers like there's no tomorrow. A multitude of people are Xing out anything that's repetitive or overly frequent or less than insightful or utilitarian amongst them or entertaining. And so spend doesn't buy attention. Attention certainly doesn't buy trust. And culture decides what spreads. If you look at Steve's video, culture decides it. No brand on planet Earth could have competed with Taylor Swift in the 10-carat antique cut diamond. Like that, as stupid as it might have been, well, that's my point of view. I'm always saying it might be great for other people, just not for me. Surprising that dominated global conversation in that. And so I think at the end of this, what I've learned, as Steve shared the interesting data and all of you as panelists, is the most influential doesn't mean the loudest. Being the most influential means the most chosen, the most selected, the most talked about, and the most advocated for, particularly when shit hits the fan. That's influence. You've got built-in crisis management because of your influence on that. So thank you to all of you for your time, your insights, your wisdom. I really appreciated it. I know everyone else did as well. It was an amazing conversation where I learned so much, so thank you. I know we're going to be taking a 15-minute break right now. We'll be taking a 15-minute break right now, and we'll be back for our keynote with Diana Frost, Global Chief Growth Officer of the Kraft Heinz Company. So a must-see and a don't miss. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That was great.
Okay, let's keep moving. Breaking news. Breaking news. Our keynote speaker just got off a call. Kraft Heinz is not splitting. They're staying together. I'd not met our keynote until today. We met virtually a few times as jury members for the Young Lions. And in the last few months, we've spoken a few times. And when I suggested the idea of being a keynote today, as busy as she is, and trust me, she's really busy, she was eager from the outset. Diana Frost is, in one word, impressive. She is the Global Chief Growth Officer for the Kraft Heinz Company, which is going to stay as one company, based in Chicago, but she spends a lot of her time just north of the city because she lives in Aurora. Diana is helping usher in a new era of growth, overseeing enterprise strategy, marketing excellence and capabilities and innovation, which encompasses insights, analytics, and R&D. It's a big job. She's created an organization to build a global growth and innovation engine responsible for delivering $2 billion in incremental sales by 2027. That's mammoth. Her efforts have led to a creative and business resurgence for Heinz, the company's largest and most profitable brand, with more than $5 billion in annual revenue. At the same time, she likes to say that she has 4 girls, 2 dogs, and a circus. And she's a big sports fan. She was born in Toronto. Both of her parents are from Quebec. She's bilingual. And while our keynote today works with people from across the globe, she spends much of her time in the US. Diana is Canadian. Please welcome Diana Frost.
So much, Steve. I don't really know how to follow that introduction, but just to say I could not be happier to be here today in Canada and with all of you. So as Steve mentioned, my name is Dinah Frost. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of the Kraft Heinz Company that as of this morning at 7 a.m. is staying the Kraft Heinz Company moving forward, and we could not be more excited. I have the privilege and honor of looking after all of these phenomenal brands. That is 200 brands across 70 countries, 3 different temperature states. Now, this is a huge privilege because we are in 96 or 97% of households across US and Canada. And quite frankly, over the last number of years, we had been acting like a bank that sold food. And not really a good bank, not being consumer first, not being investment forward. And that's something that we've looked to change, and I hope you can learn a couple things today as I walk you through a little bit of our journey. But I can't actually walk you through a bit of our journey without actually acknowledging what the heck is going on in the world. So every single one of you who have the privilege of working on brands are seeing headlines like this every single solitary day. Whether it is geopolitical uncertainty, whether it is tariffs, all of the above. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that we need to deal with as brand leaders and as brand marketers are what is happening with the consumer. US consumer confidence is at an all-time low. Now, what you could look at with this slide and this stat is that doesn't change whether you're looking at the Canadian consumer, the US consumer, or someone in the UK, in China, in Brazil. No matter what, consumers are under tremendous amounts of pressure. Now, let's look at a couple key statistics here that are very important. When you think of who we sell to every day, what are they dealing with? Well, number one, 1/3 of Canadians say their household is close to a financial breaking point. Number two, nearly half of Americans don't have any money left over after paying their bills. Back to Canada, nearly half of Canadians are within $200 of not being able to pay their bills. Now, when you work in a consumer-based business, and if you don't have this at the forefront of everything you see and everything you do, we have lost the plot before we've even started. Now, let's take a step back and actually look at businesses and what businesses are facing. Almost half of businesses cite uncertain economic times as a key challenge. Number two, over 60% of businesses reported negative cost impacts from tariffs. And number three, beyond that, there is geopolitical instability, climate change, and regulatory environment changing every day. And that, again, does not change whether you're working north or south of the border. Now, I promise at some point I'm going to give you something to be hopeful about. This is a very depressing part of the conversation. It is going to get better, I promise you. But I also wanted to give you a unique view from the lens of Heinz. So not only, like all brands, do we have to deal with everything else, we got a little bit of a history in Canada that's not a great one. How many in this room have heard of the ketchup wars? That's a lot of people when you're talking about ketchup. So back in 2015, when Kraft and Heinz first came together, we left Leamington, Ontario. And what did that do? Well, overnight, that lost 10 share points. 10 share points for our biggest and best brand and our ketchup business. Now, what people don't know is actually in 2021, we brought it back. It is fully Canadian, it is manufactured in Mount Royal, and we still have all of our tomatoes coming from Leamington, Ontario. Well, do you think consumers knew that or know that? No, absolutely not. So last year, when there was the big conversation on tariffs, even our former prime minister came out and said, the ketchup wars are back. That was a really fun day at work, just wanted to let you know that. And so after that happened, guess what? We showed up on every single consumer list of do not buy. Do not buy, they are not Canadian. So that was a little bit of a unique piece in the tariff world. Now, when you ask consumers where Heinz is made, they have absolutely no idea. No clue. But at that point, they cared. They cared, and they should care. Now I'm going to go a little bit of the unique situation south of the border. At the same time that all of this was going on, there was a huge movement for making America healthy again. And so what does that do? Well, that attack on big food is something that was at the forefront of all of our conversations. So you've got your tariffs north of the border, and you've got your Maha movement south of the border. So what do we do? How do you take all of that and make some sense of it into a way that actually brings your consumers along and drives growth for your business? Well, this is a statement that I use often with my team. Volatility is temporary, values and value are permanent. So how do you find that inspiration? And here are about 5 principles, and again, take them or leave them. I hope you can grab one nugget of how we've looked at it within our business at Kraft Heinz. So the first principle. Now this is a fun one. Embrace your roots authentically. And what does that actually mean? How many times have you guys seen brand marketers jump from business to business to business and only sit on a brand for maybe 12 to 18 months, at most 24 months? A lot. It happens all the time. So what are they not doing? Well, you know what? They're not going back to the roots and understanding why that brand is the way it is. So one of the first things I did with my team was learn from the best, learn from our founder. And I love this quote, "To do a common thing uncommonly well brings success." So it was getting out of the boardroom. It was going to the California tomato farms. It was going to Pittsburgh, where we have our Heinz Museum, and having both our brand marketers and our partners rediscover why Heinz is the way it is. Many people don't know that actually H.J. Heinz was the first person to actually have a glass bottle so you could see the quality of the ketchup product. He was one of the founding members of the FDA and actually measured the size of the pickles to make sure that they were uniform. That's an obsession with quality. We had forgotten that as a business. So what we did after over 150 years, there had never been a global campaign on Heinz. It was a brand that was 153 years old and had never had a global campaign. And so what did we do? We launched this new campaign that was based on, it has to be Heinz, but Heinz is made with and inspires irrational love. Now let me break that down a little bit more for you. Irrational love. Well, what does that mean? Loving Heinz ketchup so much that, like Ed Sheeran, you've got a tattoo on your left bicep. And that is a true story. Loving Heinz so much that you actually have a smuggling ring in your school because your cafeteria has only limited you to 2 ketchup packets every time you eat lunch. All true stories. What's also true is Adele carrying Heinz ketchup packets in her purse. You also have people that have said that they're a Heinz heiress and they cannot actually have another type of ketchup in a restaurant. These are all true stories. And once we started going down the rabbit hole, there was a rationality with this brand because people loved it so much. One of my favorite stories that I've ever heard about Heinz, and this is actually on our beans business in the UK, was that Ringo Starr in 1967 on their trip to India, the only thing he carried was a big suitcase of Heinz beans. It is also the 5th most confiscated item in TSA in the UK. That is irrational love. So we found those stories and we started to tell them. Now, the second piece, going back to HJ's quote, is made with irrational love. And this story actually tells itself. Meet Hector.
I love to have red things, as you can see. It's the color of that I like the most. The tomatoes, and it's the color of the flag of the country that I'm citizen of. Yes, I have Heinz shoes.
How many different Heinz things do you think you own?
I don't know. A lot. Heinz is the celebrity. I enjoy that coverage. Everybody knows who you are when you carry this in the plane.
So you would think that Hector is a paid influencer. Hector is not a paid influencer. He is an over 35-year employee and is our tomato master. And so you have never met anyone who loves tomatoes and loves Heinz more than Hector. So we started telling our stories with Hector as our influencer because he comes with the credibility. And we took other R&D folks who work in our business across the world and really started to tell our stories. So when you think about embracing your brand and your roots authentically, getting back to made with and inspiring irrational love covers both your quality and influence and your consumer in terms of their love. So that was the starting point. Now, the next one, and this is really important in this point of time, be first and be proactive and have a point of view. So I'll take us back to when former Prime Minister Trudeau talked about the ketchup wars. Well, what did we do? A couple days later, we were out, actually 72 hours later, we were out in full force in sharing our message, owning our message that Heinz is made in Canada by Canadians. We also did the same thing because we have a massive manufacturing facility in Mount Royal, Quebec. And we turned that around incredibly quickly to own our message. This was our message to own. It was our fault, in fact, that Canadians did not know that we were made in Canada. We had not been loud and proud enough on that. The second is we moved with agility. So as I said before, 72 hours. We also bought a Super Bowl spot and actually filmed it within 72 hours at our plant in Mount Royal and had it on last year's Super Bowl to, again, own our message. We committed to an investment of $200 million in our manufacturing within Canada to continue to show that well over 80% of our products are made in Canada, all of Kraft and all of Heinz. And last but not least, the community support piece has become so important. How many are aware of Kraft Hockeyville? A phenomenal program that's been for over 20 years. This year is our 20th anniversary, and instead of supporting 3 provinces, we're supporting all. We are also one of the biggest donators to Canada Food Banks. And in a moment in time where consumers are where they are, could not be more important. This is our responsibility. Affordable food for everyone. So supporting the communities is another key pillar here. Now let's talk about the US. How did we answer the call in the US? Well, one of the biggest things, obviously, with the Make America Healthy Again movement was owning our message. Capri Sun, a brand that actually didn't have artificial dyes, getting that message to the forefront for consumers. The second was we were the first company in the US to come out and say we were removing all artificial dyes from our entire portfolio by 2027. And at the same time, we were one of the founding members of a coalition called AFIT, Americans for Ingredient Transparency, which actually is all about granting nutritious and affordable food for Americans. That's setting a new standard and taking a leadership position there. Standing behind our products and product quality, offering consumers a money-back guarantee. And then last but not least, in the US, similar to Canada, investing in our infrastructure, $3 billion to be invested over the coming years. So that was all about the principle of owning your message and being proactive and being first. And not always having all the answers. When the tariff stuff started to come out, we didn't know where it was gonna go, but we had to get ahead of it and we had to own our answers. Now, number 3, I love this principle of being distinctive. I forget who was talking about it earlier in one of the sessions about indifference. Well, being distinctive makes sure that there is not indifference to you. So what does that mean? What do we do with some of our campaigns? So I don't know if any of you guys are aware of ketchup fraud, but this is a real true epidemic in the world where you have a number of food service facilities that serve ketchup in a ketchup bottle that is not Heinz but puts it in our bottle. That is being distinctive. So we took it and turned it on its head and actually turned this into a business opportunity where we actually had consumers tell us where ketchup fraud was happening. And that became a lead gen for our away from home team to actually go in and sell in against, hey, you say you're Heinz, how about you are Heinz? So that was a phenomenal campaign that we've used over and over again to drive our away from home business. The next one. It's very distinctive when you actually don't have to put a brand logo on the page. How many times have you guys been sitting in rooms, it's like, where's our logo gonna go? Is it big enough? Where does it sit? Well, when you are distinctive, people just know who you are. So how do you take the different host foods that consumers are eating, whether it's with fries or burgers or chips or pasta, and really, you talk about them because it just has to be Heinz with them. And this has become a very successful campaign, mostly in the UK, but one that is going to come to North America as well. And last but certainly not least, partnerships. So I heard a lot this morning of you guys talking about the importance of partnerships. And I think here is a great one. This came out of, I would say, a TikTok where Gigi Hadid was talking about vodka sauce. And so we very quickly got in to partner with Absolute Vodka and look at the distinctiveness. You take the distinctiveness of Absolute, the distinctiveness of Heinz, and you put it together. Absolutely tomato and ridiculously good. That is the cornerstone of being distinctive and breaking through. Now, this is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, this section, which is solving big consumer problems. It is not big consumer problems. But what it is having fun with small consumer problems. Whether it was, I don't know if you remember Hot Dog Pact that we did, where we were really upset about the number of hot dogs and buns, all the way back to one of the movies from back in the 80s. But bringing hot dogs and buns together to really solve consumer problems and having the right number. That's one of them. This next one that I'm actually going to talk about, it started with a campaign where my team had taken a look and saying, you know what, every single fry box looks like a Heinz Keystone. So I'll play this video and we'll go in terms of what problem we were solving. So this was one piece. It was more really kind of celebrating the iconicity of our brand. But as we were going down this path, we were like, wait a second. There is something really, really wrong with the fry box. How many times do people have to open those stupid little sachets? They get it everywhere. They're small. You have 7 of them to actually eat a fry with. So this came up with a Heinz dipper.
So annoying. Why?
A big consumer problem. But that goes back to, honestly, guys, just having fun with the whole thing. Making sure you understand your brands, owning your voice, knowing where distinctiveness comes from, and having some fun with consumers along the way. Now, I've also heard you guys talk a bit this morning about hacking culture and what does that actually mean. And this is a space where really Heinz has done a lot of work over the last number of years. And I'm going to talk also about another brand. But how many of you guys know this guy right here? DJ Mustard. Yes, so he's one of the biggest producers now in the music industry, and he works with Kendrick Lamar. So last year, when one of his songs became massive with Mustard, I'm sorry that I had to do that, but we decided that he would become our chief mustard officer. He does it way better. Turn his TV off. And so hacking culture, we actually launched this by the Grammys, then launched a limited edition mustard item that went across our food service business in the US. So again, hacking culture needs to be tied to some type of business result, right? It's not just hacking culture for culture's sake, but it got noticed. Billions of impressions, and we've continued the collaboration with DJ Mustard. And being north of the border, I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen the Weenie 500. Not something I ever thought I'd be saying in a keynote speech. But this is one where Oscar Mayer is one of our most beloved brands in the US, but also needed some love. And so on Memorial Day, when you've got the Indianapolis big race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we decided that before the event started, we needed to have a Weenie 500 race with 6 of our Oscar Mayer Weenie mobiles. And this actually took off. Fox loved it so much that they actually had the commentators there. Some of the drivers want to be involved in it this year. And it was one that really started to bring Oscar Mayer back in culture. So instead of the champagne popping at the end, it was condiments. So all of that to say is your teams can have some fun, but it also needs to tie back into a business imperative. And that's what we continuously look to do in Fuel within Kraft Heinz. So what did that yield in results? Because this is all great that we talk about the principles, but what did that yield in results? So in Canada, when the tariffs heated up at the beginning of last year, we went down 4 share points initially. We are now up 2. So being there and owning your message really has proven to turn around this business. We also grew every single brand in Canada under Kraft. In the US, on ketchup, we gained 1 full share point. In terms of the mayo, we returned to growth. We will return to growth by end of 26. We were down 25% at the beginning of last year. And we've already stabilized this business. It's now down only about 2.5%. Salad dressings returned to growth for the first time in 5 years. And Capri Sun returned to growth in 25. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all rosy. You have seen the headlines in relation to Kraft Heinz and having top-line growth challenges. But what I'm saying is we are going surgically 1 brand at a time across our 200, starting with our most important, our top 10, to turn these businesses around with these principles. And we're starting to see green shoots that it's working. So if I leave you with anything today, and it's hard to tell our story in 25 minutes or less, is 1, you're never too old to find yourself. Really help your teams rediscover your brand's roots and fall in love with them again. Your agency is the same way. We've gotten the best ideas on our business through WhatsApp, not over a boardroom table. It is not a buy and sell transactional relationship. It is a partnership, and know that. The second is go then grow with speed and conviction. You will not have all the information you want when you want to have it. So when we knew everything was heating up with tariffs, we could have waited to see, what's going to happen next? How much is this going to impact? We didn't have the time to do that. So in 72 hours, we turned it around and we owned our message. You go, and then you fuel to grow when you see that it's working. Last but certainly not least, value and values matter. Consumers are hurting right now. How do you ensure that you put yourself into their mind frame and what they are dealing with and the decisions they have to make every single month, and commit to that and be consistent with that? And then last but certainly not least, and you guys have said it before, have some fun. Have some fun with it. I promise you, we don't take ketchup too seriously. Or mac and cheese or any of the others. Have fun with it. Fall in love with your brands and ensure that your partners do as well. Thank you again for having me today, and I'm happy to take some questions.
So we did the question session differently for our keynote. We always run out of time, so this event sells out weeks and weeks in advance. So we surveyed everybody and asked them for some questions, and we've gathered some of the best of them. And hopefully we can get through them all, because we had some great questions. So Diana, I'm just going to start with the first one. What do you think is the toughest obstacle for a brand to create more influence for itself?
I think one of the biggest ones, and I think I've said it in and throughout, is knowing what your distinction is. I mean, a lot of these brands, particularly the ones that I have the privilege of working with, are over 100 years old, and they've become a little bit dusty. So they're salient, but their meaningful indifference is a thing that's weighed. So the biggest thing to drive influence, number 1, is knowing what your distinctiveness is. What do you bring to the table for consumers? Where do you fit into their lives? And then if you know that, then you can determine which channel at which moment in what place. But knowing that first and foremost and spending the time to understand that is incredibly important, because if not, you become culture chasing or celebrity chasing or whatever the case may be that's not rooted in your distinction. Because it goes back to the point on indifference. Consumers aren't obsessed and thinking about ketchup the way I'm thinking about ketchup. And so what is the moment in which you play a role in their lives that drives that value that ties to your values? But I think that's the biggest obstacle that we all face right now.
Okay, this question is about AI, and it came up earlier in the panel. So brands strive to be authentic, At Kraft Heinz, you have some of the world's most recognizable brands in your portfolio. What counsel do you give your marketers on leveraging AI tools while maintaining your brand goals?
That is the question that's being asked everywhere right now. And I think the biggest thing for me is a couple of things. It's never been, I think some people look at it as never been a scarier time to be a marketer. I actually think it's never been a better time to be a marketer. The biggest skills that are required to win in an AI world are critical thinking, creativity, and innovation, right? So if we spend all of our time talking about the beast of AI, AI is a tool. It is not the thing. It is like a pencil or a computer or all of those things. So make sure you use it as the tool. And the other piece that's incredibly important is what skills and capabilities are you building within your organizations? Who are you hiring from? How are you training people to problem solve appropriately? To ask the right questions? Because particularly with AI now, it's garbage in, garbage out. You don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right response out of it. So while it can drive efficiency, no question, and there's a lot of things that it can do very, very well, it will never replace critical thinking, creativity, and innovation. And those are the things that are going to be the most valuable assets now and in the future. And so it's those who actually invest in that that will win the game long term.
So this is and these were not planted questions. These came from everybody. So this is something that you touched on earlier as well. Kraft Heinz is an American company. It's a global brand. With rising nationalism in Canada and many countries around the world, how do you empower your local teams to maintain a local credibility while leveraging the scale and resources of such a global powerhouse?
What's so exciting about that, and I'll use Heinz as an example because it's our biggest global brand, is when you think about a platform like Made With and Inspires Irrational Love, that doesn't matter what country you're in or where you are, but bringing it to life locally is incredibly important. And so we've been able to standardize a platform, but leave creativity locally. And that's allowed the teams to move with speed and agility. So had we not had that framework in place, I'll give you the example, and it's probably an overused one, we never would have done Seemingly Ranch with Taylor Swift. And I'm not sure if any of you guys saw that one, but that was the one where when Taylor showed up at Travis Kelce's first game and she was having chicken and ketchup and Seemingly Ranch, within 24 hours, we rebranded our product called Cranch, rebranded the product, put it out there, called it Seemingly Ranch, sold it into Walmart within 3 weeks and sold out. Had we not done that, Seemingly Ranch never would have happened. Had we not had that platform giving our local teams the creative license to just go, that never would have happened because it would have been caught up in 27,000 approvals around the world. And now, what I'm not going to stand up here and say is we get it right all the time. Sometimes having that and giving the autonomy to local teams, we mess up, and we've stepped in it a couple of times. But I would rather that than holding up the creativity within the business. And so you take the good with the bad there, but that's, I would say, the biggest thing.
I remember that.
Yes.
So this is another theme. Given the amount of time that the average person spends daily in social media, how important is this channel to the growth of your brands? Do you have any examples of leveraging social media influencers to build or scale brand growth?
I mean, it's absolutely critical. I mean, food trends start on social media. So in my world, it's everything, whether it's how recipes are being made on TikTok to how influencers are blending different partnerships with our brands. That's how some of our collabs in fashion happen. So what I would say is how we think of our social channels are in relation to the brand's goals. But we are 65 to 70% digital in terms of our investment and spend. And that's only going to stay and I would say probably increase. So we've leveraged influencers, everything from Hector, our internal influencer, to more celebrity influencers, whether it is DJ Mustard. We've leveraged Ryan Reynolds in the past in partnership on the Deadpool activation with Hugh Jackman. So I would say dependent on the brand's goals, it's absolutely critical and it's well over half of our investment.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, but this is a great question to end on. You've worked with marketing talent around the globe. What have you seen as strengths of our Canadian marketing talent pool? And what are some of the opportunities for us to build a better, to be able to compete on the global stage with our talent?
This is my favorite question by far, and this answer is not because I am in this room and the fact that I am Canadian. I'm going to preface that, is that Canadian talent is the best talent around them. Full stop. And this will probably go back to my US folks, and I might get in trouble later in Chicago, but the best talent that I've worked with, and I have the privilege of working in 70 countries. And the reason why I see Canadians having such great talent is, number one, you guys can see the forest through the trees. And what I mean by that is the businesses, you can wrap your arms around it holistically. In other markets, you can go deep on one part of the thing functionally, but being able to understand the whole strategy, how you pull different levers across the P&L, it is best in Canada, for sure. So how you actually play that part in a global scale is you guys and the Canadian talent can spot things that other people can't spot because they are so deep in the weeds. So the one thing I'd continue to encourage is, yes, hone your craft, no question, but always understand and ask the question how it fits into the bigger picture, how it will ultimately drive impact in business, how it changes persuasion with consumers. If you continuously ask those questions, you are raising yourself above the majority of talent. Because most people nowadays, particularly given all of the headlines and everything you are being bombarded with and facing every day, so many people every day check an activity list in a box. And it's level of activity over level of impact. Canadians can reverse that. Focus on impact over activity. And that is the thing that will continue to have Canadian talent rise everywhere you go.
That's a perfect ending to a great session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
That's amazing. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your attendance today. My name is Brett McIntosh. I'm the president of Publicis here in Toronto. And I'll get to a few comments and observations in a moment. First, though, two things I do want to take issue with what I heard today. Steve's got two lovely children, but they're obviously not Gen Alpha, because when he says Gen Alpha has no clout and no dough, he does not understand my son, my 11-year-old son, and the clout he thinks he has in the house. Second, great idea, Nikki, but I'm not sure I'm going to do TikTok roulette at a dinner party with my wife sitting next to me. But interesting for those who want to give it a run. But I understand how much fun it can be. Look, we're really pleased as Publicis to be part of what is just a wonderful partnership with Ipsos, with the Globe and Mail, and with the CMA. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and just every year it seems to get better, and there's without a doubt that this is probably, and certainly the best year. What a wonderful morning we've had together. I do want to start with some thank yous before a couple observations. Steve, Allison, and Penny, our partnership. Steve said it, we were together last night. It's been the better part of a decade working together on this. We've never had a fight. We've had a lot of healthy debate, and we certainly have a lot of fun putting this event together. But we'd be remiss without stopping to thank those on our team that really, truly make it happen. At the CMA, Natasha, Laura, and the rest of the crew that always jump in and do a wonderful job, thank you. At Ipsos, Destiny, M&A, Diane, the storytelling team, and Sucheta Clementine, thank you so much, and most particularly Natasha Marcel, who really wrangles so many of us and really makes things happen on behalf of our group. At the Globe and Mail, Constance, thank you for your continued organization and really guiding us. Penny is, as I said, a wonderful host. The staff here at the event center, the AV team, the hosting team, you guys are first class. And to my team at Publicis, Andrea, Andrew, Ariane, Lulu, and the rest of the team, thank you. It is a wonderful group that brings us together. So just a couple thoughts with the thank yous. One, if you've enjoyed today and you have a team in Montreal, please note that on February 25th, for the first time ever, we're extending this event into the French Canadian market, and we'll be hosting this event with similar partners and similar partnership group on February 25th. So if you have a team or you have peers in that market, encourage them to attend. Secondly, at Publicis, we've built our positioning and our entire focus around the notion of lead the change, and I think that really rings true today. And a couple things I wanted to speak on that. We heard a lot of, de-risk, add risk, voluminous content, less voluminous content. And the reason why we're hearing that from all angles is it's confusing. And it's challenging and never been more challenging as a marketer today. But I agree wholeheartedly with Diana. There's never been more opportunity for marketers as well. And what she wrapped up with, I swear, we did not kind of coordinate notes, but so much of what I've written down here aligns with her, and I'm going to tell a little story about it. When I went to university, I had a professor that I just loved dearly. He was one of those professors we've all had who inspired us. And he split his time between, in the business school, between a large American university and a Canadian university. And he told a story one day that sticks with me many, many years later about Canadian marketers versus American marketers. And that they were just far superior to what he experienced in the US. And at that time, it was really about the notion of prioritization. He saw in the Canadian marketers that we dealt with an ability to zero in, as Diana said, see the forest through the trees, as to what matters most, and focus on that and do it really well. And I think that last part, as Diana said, is just crucial today. With that focus, what's that impact that you're gonna make? It's available to all of us. And I'll take it back to the story that Steve started telling and wrap it up with this. AXA is actually a global client of ours. Insurance company, Steve talked about it, based in Paris, France. And that CMO spent the better part of a year and a half working with her C-suite, working with the regulators, and understanding that if we could add 2 lines to every home insurance policy and start including domestic abuse in insurance policy, the impact it'll make on their business, on their brand, and simply on society is significant. And that did not come out of the regulatory side of their business, that came out of their marketing organization. So that opportunity for all of us and the notion of impact as marketers is there for us, no matter what business, no matter what category, hot dogs and ketchup, insurance, it's there and it's available to you. So I hope we take that away, not just the notion of inspiration from today, but that notion of kind of focus and impact, because there's so many great things that we can do. And finally, I just do want to spend the last minute thanking you. We know your time is valuable. This is usually where I say, I'm what's standing between you and the chicken or the corporate, fire walk or what have you. But today, hopefully, what I'm standing between you and is that opportunity to go back to the office, sit with your teams, and focus in on what's going to matter most for your business and brand. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day, everybody.